Hey, oh my goodness, we're doing this series, Ungodly Leaders. Seems perfect for the election season that we are in. And here's a question for you to think about. What happens when God's leader messes up? Is that possible? God has a leader who messes up? Say it isn't so. But before we answer that question, here's a part of a joke. Why isn't the government displaying a nativity scene at Christmas? Why isn't the government? So you'll have to wait till the end to hear the answer. And as we think about what happens when God's leader messes up, let's think about that. Because the reality is the Bible is full of leaders God put in place who mess up. Think about it. Well, one of the first ones is Saul, right? So Saul, we read about him in 1 Samuel, and he completely messes up. God selected Saul to be the first king of Israel, appointed, anointed by Samuel, the prophet Samuel. Samuel prays over him, prophesies over him, anoints him, and it says that Saul went away and he was changed to a different man. You can read it. It's powerful in the sense that Saul was kind of, humble and shy and, insecure. And then God comes on him, anoints him, and he changes to a different man. But he messed up, right? I mean, Samuel tells him, wait for me before you go and you fight the Amalekites, and make sure that you give God the first fruits, the best part of your first battle. And that's not what Saul does. When Saul goes into battle, he, number one, jumps the gun and doesn't wait for Samuel. And number two, God says, destroy all of the best. That's kind of an offering to God of the first fruits. Saul doesn't do that. He keeps the best. He keeps the best sheep, the best cattle, the best servants, the best gold. He keeps all the best of the best. And when Samuel shows up and confronts him, Saul doesn't apologize. He's like, well, I was actually saving for the sacrifices. So I was supposed to kill the king of the Amalekites, and he didn't. He disobeyed God, and he didn't apologize. He didn't repent. He didn't change. And I want us to think about this because it's not just Saul. There are other leaders in the Bible who mess up. How about Moses? Moses, powerfully used by God. Oh my goodness, we talked about him in the last episode. Leads the Israelites out of captivity, confronts Pharaoh, all these huge, serious miracles. Goes up to Sinai and has, God bring him the 10 Commandments. He comes down and sees the Israelites, worshiping the golden calf, and he's angry. He breaks the tablets, but he messes up because at one point God tells him, speak to the rock when they're wandering in the wilderness. Speak to the rock and I'll give you some water. And instead of speaking to the rock, Moses hits the rock, right? He messes up. And because he messed up, God said, I'm not going to bring you into the promised land. Personally, I'm like, woo. I mean, he did all these things right, one mess up? But still, but I do think this. I think with Moses, I love that God buried Moses. When Moses died, the funeral for Moses was with God. I think that's really powerful. And I'd rather die with God and be buried in the wilderness than live in the promised land with a bunch of rebellious Israelites. This is kind of something to think about there. What happens when a leader that God puts in place messes up? How about David? Read about him in 2 Samuel and how he messed up with Bathsheba. This wasn't just kind of a little slip. This was a major mess up. He had sex with a woman who was married to one of his military leaders. And then she got pregnant and he wound up killing her husband. Finally, at the end of the day, he marries Bathsheba because he had killed her husband. And then God redeems the mistake and the whole mess up. He redeems it, and the baby that Bathsheba ultimately has with David, his name is Solomon, goes on to become the greatest, one of the greatest leaders of all of Israel. People mess up. Leaders mess up. And it's not just presidents who mess up or congressmen. You have mayors, you have pastors, you have religious leaders. People mess up. No one is perfect. In fact, I would ask you, look at your hands. Do you see any nail prints in your hands? We're just going to go with no on that. I have no nail prints. And I say that because Jesus is the only perfect one. He's the only one with nail prints. You and I, we are imperfect and we mess up. Some of the mess up that we have is big. Some of it seems a little smaller. Some of it's just, oops, I broke the law. I ran a red light, or I ran a yellow orange light, right? We all mess up. Leaders mess up. And so I want us to be very conscientious and aware that we need to pray for our leaders. I talked about that, 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 1 and 2. Pray for our leaders. But then let's also have grace and understand that despite the things where we mess up, God can redeem. God can get good out of our failures, flaws, and mistakes, our mess-ups. God is able to step into that space where we have completely failed. A leader has failed. A leader has had a moral falling. A leader has been deceived. Just all kinds of issues. These things don't rattle God. In fact, if you look throughout human history, God's been navigating flawed leaders for all of humanity. It's not a new thing. Regardless of who gets elected or who doesn't get elected, regardless of who's in Congress or who's in the Senate or who the Supreme Court, God is still able to navigate to his end game, to his goals, to his plans and purposes. So let's be mindful that we don't keep our eyes on leaders more than we keep our eyes on God. Because at the end of the day, this is who we really serve and who we really follow, who is the passion and the goal of our heart, is being in love with God and letting God be our ultimate leader, and following and being made in the image of God with compassion and grace and loving kindness and forgiveness and all of the character, the values of who God is, living as well through us as his son and as his daughter. So thank you for watching. Hit the notification bell right there. Keep you posted with new content. And here's the end. This is the end of the joke. Ugh, I really like this one. Why isn't the government displaying a nativity scene at Christmas? Because they can't find 3 wise men. Oh my goodness. The next episode series will be phenomenal.